Welcome to True Crime, the Untold Stories. In today's episode, we delve into a shocking story of manipulation, secrecy, and violence. It all begins with a trusted psychiatrist's affair with an 18-year-old patient, which results in an unexpected pregnancy and spirals into a brutal murder that leaves an entire community in shock. At just 18 years old, Hannah Hanaway had already faced more hardships than many do in a lifetime. Growing up in Redmond, Washington, a city about 15 miles east of Seattle, her childhood was marked by profound challenges. When Hannah was just 9 years old, she made a tragic discovery. Her father, who had been battling bipolar disorder, had taken his own life. She found him in the bathroom. A few years later, her mother remarried, but instead of bringing stability, her stepfather introduced a new wave of trauma. He was abusive, transforming what should have been a safe haven into a place filled with fear. From a young age, Hannah endured mental, emotional, and physical abuse, leaving her deeply scarred. By the time she reached high school, her life was in turmoil. Struggling with severe depression, she found it increasingly difficult to get out of bed, maintain friendships, or keep up with her schoolwork. The pressure eventually became overwhelming, and she dropped out, unable to envision a future where things might get better. By 17, Hannah felt completely lost. It was around this time that Aunt Judith encouraged her to see a psychiatrist. Desperate for a solution, they found Dr. Stanley Dixon, a well-known psychiatrist in Seattle. His strong reputation of working with teens and young adults gave Hannah hope that she might finally break free from the painful cycle of her past. Initially, the psychotherapy session seemed helpful. Dr. Dixon offered her the support and kindness she had long needed, creating a space where she felt safe enough to share her darkest experiences without fear of judgment. However, as the months went by and she turned 18, their sessions took a disturbing turn. Dr. Dixon introduced what he referred to as intimate healing techniques, steering the therapy in an increasingly inappropriate direction. He first insisted that Hannah be naked during their sessions and that they engage in kissing and physical touching. In the following session, he escalated his demands, claiming it was necessary for both of them to be naked and have sex as part of the therapy. Dr. Dixon framed these methods as ways for Hannah to explore trust, intimacy, and self-worth. But in reality, they were manipulative tactics meant to coerce her into a sexual relationship. Instead of providing genuine support, Dr. Dixon exploited her vulnerability, leaving Hannah more confused and isolated. Although she tried to convince herself that this might be a strange form of healing, deep down, she felt trapped and uncertain. Just days before her death, Hannah found out she was pregnant. The news left her overwhelmed. She had no idea how Dr. Dixon would react or what it would mean for her future. She had recently started a job at a local Target store to make ends meet, but her income was barely enough to cover basic necessities. The thought of becoming a mother at 19 was daunting. Yet, the idea of having a family something safe and her own gave her a small spark of hope. She imagined what her life could be like if Dr. Dixon chose to support her. However, when she shared the news with him, he responded with cold indifference. His reaction left her feeling abandoned and more vulnerable than ever before. In her final days, Hannah clung to a fragile hope that things might somehow improve. Despite her fears and uncertainty, the pregnancy gave her a reason to dream of a better future. Tragically, she never got the chance to see where life might take her. Her future was cut short, her struggles and hopes silenced forever. On the morning of July 15, 2016, Redmond residents were met with a shocking and gruesome discovery. Around 7 a.m., a delivery driver named Ted McKee, who was making his usual rounds, noticed something unusual in the alley behind a Target store. This was a familiar place for Ted, typically quiet in the early morning. But on this day, he spotted a figure lying motionless on the ground near the dumpsters. At first, he thought it might be a homeless person sleeping or someone injured from a fall. As he got closer, the horrifying reality set in. The body of a young woman lay bruised and bloodied, her clothing torn and stained. She was positioned unnaturally, with clear signs of a violent struggle evident around her. Ted realized this was no accident. Struggling to stay composed, he immediately called 911, his voice trembling as he described the scene. Dispatchers tried to keep him calm, but the shock of witnessing such brutality was evident. Within minutes, officers from the Redmond Police Department arrived and secured the area. They quickly identified the victim as Hannah Hanaway, a local Target employee known to many in the community. As police examined the scene, they noted multiple blunt force trauma injuries on Hannah's body, indicating a fierce and violent assault. Blood spattered the nearby walls and a trash, underscoring the intensity of the struggle. Items like a broken necklace and an earring were scattered near her body, evidence of a desperate fight. The abrasions on her hands suggested she had tried to defend herself against the blows. Investigators cordoned off the area and meticulously began collecting evidence. Detectives, wearing gloves, used tweezers to gather fibers and took swabs for potential DNA samples while photographing every detail. By midday, news of the discovery had spread throughout Redmond. The tragic death of Hannah, a young woman with her whole life ahead of her, left the community in shock, reeling and desperate for answers. Redmond police swiftly and meticulously began investigating the crime scene, where the body of 18-year-old Hannah Hanaway was discovered. Detective Jamie Watson and her team carefully documented evidence in the alley behind a Target store. The scene showed clear signs of a struggle: scattered jewelry, blood on the walls, and deep bruises on Hannah's arms and face. Initially, police suspected sexual assault due to the condition of her clothes, but an autopsy revealed otherwise. Instead, the medical report highlighted two critical findings. Hannah was 2 months pregnant and had traces of marijuana and alcohol in her system. These discoveries complicated the case. Investigators suspected that Hannah's turbulent personal life might have played a role in her death. She had endured years of hardship, particularly with her stepfather, who was known for his violent outbursts and had previously been accused of abuse. Although Hannah had reported incidents of physical abuse to authorities, the cases were dismissed due to insufficient evidence. This history put her stepfather at the top of the suspect list. However, this theory quickly fell apart when police confirmed that Hannah's mother and stepfather were hundreds of miles away at the time of her death. Phone and transaction records showed the couple on a family vacation in Maui, Hawaii, booked months prior. Photos and video footage from their hotel confirmed they were together on the day Hannah died, providing a strong alibi. Detectives found it odd, though, that the family was on vacation while Hannah appeared to be struggling with substance use and an unplanned pregnancy. With her mother and stepfather ruled out as suspects, the investigation shifted focus. Detectives were particularly troubled by the circumstances surrounding Hannah's pregnancy. Interviews with her friends and co-workers at the Target store where she worked revealed that Hannah had recently hinted at a secret relationship. She was cautious not to reveal much, but mentioned that the father of her unborn child was older and someone outside her immediate social circle. The substances found in her system raised concerns that Hannah might have been involved with someone who enabled or shared her struggles with drug and alcohol use. Investigators began delving into her social life, searching for potential suspects who had interacted with her in recent weeks. With minimal evidence left at the scene besides blood splatter and scattered belongings, Detective Watson's team turned to Hannah's personal connections, piecing together clues that could lead them closer to the truth. Dr. Stanley Dixon, 49, was a highly respected psychiatrist in Seattle, Washington, renowned for his dedication to improving the mental health of young people. Over the years, he built a reputation as a compassionate and effective counselor, particularly for troubled teens and young adults. Dr. Dixon was widely recognized for his exceptional ability to connect with clients who often struggled in traditional therapy settings. His contributions to the field earned him numerous accolades, including the Outstanding Service Award from the Redmond Mental Health Alliance in 2014 and the Distinguished Service in Psychiatry Award in 2015. However, behind this respected facade lay a disturbing reality. Police uncovered that Dr. Dixon had grossly violated professional boundaries with Hannah Hanaway, transforming their therapy sessions into unethical encounters. Under the pretense of using intimate healing techniques, which were in fact sexual acts, Dr. Dixon initiated a sexual relationship with the 18-year-old. He exploited Hannah's vulnerabilities, convincing her that these encounters were a necessary part of her emotional recovery. Dixon manipulated her into believing that this so-called intimate healing was crucial for overcoming her trauma, presenting their relationship as a unique, special bond that set her apart from his other patients. He falsely promised that the more they have sex with one another, the sooner she will be on her way to recovery. This manipulation left Hannah dependent on their sessions, placing her in an extremely vulnerable and compromised position. When police summoned Dr. Dixon for questioning, he initially appeared calm and composed, relying on his professional demeanor to maintain control. He confidently defended his methods as unconventional, but argued they were intended to build trust with his clients. However, as detectives confronted him with specific details of his physical relationship with Hannah, his calm exterior began to crack. They asked pointed questions about the so-called intimate healing techniques he used and pressed him on the ethics of engaging in a sexual relationship with a vulnerable young patient. Dr. Dixon's usual composure started to falter. He initially denied any misconduct, insisting their relationship was consensual and that he believed he was acting in Hannah's best interest. However, the investigators were not convinced. They showed him a series of text messages he had sent to Hannah, which were blatantly inappropriate and explicitly sexual. Many of these texts included detailed, step-by-step instructions for her to send him nude photos and videos, specifying explicit sexual acts she should perform in them. As detectives continued their interrogation, Dixon's responses grew defensive. He claimed his work was misunderstood and maintained that he had acted only as a guide to help Hannah with her recovery. However, the evidence painted a different picture. Detectives noted Dixon's shift in demeanor, from composed to visibly anxious, as they emphasized the power imbalance inherent in his relationship with Hannah. They questioned him about the professional and legal violations involved in his conduct, highlighting the harm inflicted on a young woman already grappling with trauma. Dixon, who had built his career on his professional credibility, now faced the very real prospect of his actions being fully exposed. Shelby Bailey Dixon, 29, was a prominent figure in Redmond, known for her sharp business acumen and tenacity. She had successfully built a thriving chain of dog grooming salons throughout Seattle. However, what truly defined Shelby was her unwavering loyalty to her husband, Dr. Stanley Dixon, a devotion so deep that she would go to great lengths to protect his reputation. Their relationship had started over a decade ago when Shelby was just 18, still grieving the loss of both her parents in a tragic plane crash. Seeking therapy, she turned to Dr. Dixon, her psychiatrist. However, their professional boundaries quickly dissolved, and the therapeutic relationship became sexual. Their sessions escalated to the point where Shelby would be naked during every meeting, and she and Dr. Dixon would engage in sexual activity. Before long, Shelby found herself inexplicably in love with the man who had once been her psychiatrist. She believed deeply that he had rescued her from a dark time, a conviction that left her feeling indebted to him. Despite the unconventional start and inappropriate nature of their relationship, Shelby always believed she was Stanley's one true partner. However, over the years, her faith in him began to waver. She noticed unsettling signs that suggested Stanley might be crossing the same sexual boundaries with other clients that he had crossed with her. Shelby's suspicions grew, feeding an intense paranoia. The idea that Stanley might be involved with his patients plagued her, making her increasingly anxious and desperate to find out the truth. Her marriage became a cycle of doubt and resentment, as her fierce loyalty clashed with the gnawing fear of betrayal. When police arrived to question Shelby, she was unaware of just how close her worst fears were to reality. Detectives presented her with damning evidence linking Stanley to 18-year-old Hannah Hanaway, including text messages and call records between them. At first, Shelby maintained her composure, clinging to the hope that it was all a misunderstanding. But as the evidence mounted, her calm facade began to crack. The realization that Stanley had exploited Hannah, much like he had once exploited her, struck hard. The detectives pressed Shelby for more information, asking if she had ever witnessed Stanley behaving inappropriately with other clients or if she suspected an affair with Hannah. Although Shelby denied knowing anything specific about Hannah, she admitted she had long been uneasy about Stanley's relationships with his clients. Her voice trembled, and she grew visibly tense as she spoke. Having spent years convincing herself of Stanley's commitment to their marriage, Shelby now faced the shattering truth. He might have been deceiving her all along. In those tense moments, her loyalty seemed to waver, replaced by a painful realization that her suspicions had been justified. Trust broken, Shelby grappled with the full weight of Stanley's betrayal. As the investigation into Hannah Hanaway's death deepened, a shocking twist emerged that changed the entire case. Initially, detectives had zeroed in on Dr. Stanley Dixon as the primary suspect due to his questionable relationship with Hannah. However, a closer examination of Shelby Bailey Dixon's digital records revealed a startling new angle. Shelby had known about her husband's affair with Hannah and had confronted the young woman directly. This discovery drastically altered the narrative. Text messages between Shelby and Hannah showed a heated exchange where Shelby, who had always appeared unwaveringly loyal to Stanley, warned Hannah to stay away from him. The language in these texts revealed Shelby's deep-seated anger and resentment, with her calling Hannah derogatory names and accusing her of destroying families. These messages suggested that Shelby's involvement in the case was far more significant than initially believed, prompting investigators to reconsider her as a potential suspect rather than just a concerned spouse. The focus of the investigation began to shift. Detectives now faced the possibility that jealousy, anger, and betrayal might have driven Shelby to take drastic action. Friends reported that Shelby had been unusually tense in the days leading up to Hannah's death, with some noticing erratic behavior that was out of character. As investigators pieced together a timeline, they found evidence suggesting Shelby knew Hannah's whereabouts and could have easily arranged a confrontation. This twist complicated the case, redirecting suspicion from Stanley to Shelby. What seemed at first like a straightforward investigation into a psychiatrist's unethical behavior had expanded into a complex web of deceit and emotional turmoil, with Shelby's potential motivations adding a new, darker layer to the mystery. As the investigation continued, detectives were left with more questions than answers. They intensified their efforts to find additional evidence, closely scrutinizing Shelby's actions and interviewing those who knew her well, determined to uncover the truth behind Hannah's death. As police delved deeper into Hannah's life and relationships, they identified another suspect, Ashton Dixon, the nephew of Stanley Dixon. Interviews with Hannah's friends and classmates revealed that Ashton had developed a disturbing obsession with her. At 18, Ashton was known as an outsider, often struggling with his temper and finding it hard to fit in. However, he was drawn to Hannah, whose quiet strength and kindness made her one of the few people who listened to him. Friends reported that Ashton confided in Hannah frequently, viewing her as the only person who truly understood and cared about him. Investigators uncovered a series of text messages that highlighted Ashton's fixation. He would send Hannah lengthy messages late at night, alternating between praise and frustration when she didn't respond promptly. His texts often included confessions of deep feelings, with Ashton implying they shared a special bond. The messages also hinted at jealousy, especially after he learned of her secret relationship with his uncle, Stanley. Friends noted that Ashton became increasingly withdrawn and moody after hearing rumors about Hannah's involvement with Stanley, expressing anger and confusion over why she would choose someone else over him. He began isolating himself, obsessively checking her social media, and even showing up at places he knew she frequented, like local coffee shops and stores in Redmond. When police confronted Ashton, he appeared visibly uncomfortable. Detectives presented him with the messages he'd sent to Hannah, questioning his possessive and angry tone. Initially, Ashton downplayed his actions, nervously claiming he just cared about her and wanted to make sure she was okay. But as the questioning continued, he grew defensive, insisting he didn't understand why his relationship with Hannah was being blown out of proportion. His discomfort escalated when detectives asked about his whereabouts on the night of her death. Ashton became evasive, his tone shifting between frustration and fear as he repeatedly denied being near the scene. Detectives couldn't ignore the intensity of Ashton's fixation. His behavior suggested a pattern of a young man feeling rejected and betrayed by someone he idolized. Ashton's social media accounts further painted a picture of obsession, filled with posts and photos dedicated to Hannah, often accompanied by desperate captions. Although the police weren't ready to make any arrests, they identified Ashton as a person of interest, suspecting that his feelings for Hannah may have escalated into something more sinister. With multiple suspects and mounting evidence, the investigation now shifted focus to piecing together the puzzle that could finally reveal the truth behind Hannah's tragic death. As the police investigation drew to a close, mounting evidence pointed to a chilling conclusion. Dr. Stanley Dixon, Hannah's psychiatrist and secret lover, was responsible for her death. Hannah had confided in Dixon that she was pregnant with his child, a revelation that sent him into a panic. Dr. Dixon, known in his community for his stellar reputation and numerous awards, had always been meticulous about keeping his private life hidden. An affair with a teenage patient, especially one that resulted in pregnancy, threatened to unravel the carefully constructed image he had built. According to police reports, when Dr. Dixon learned of the pregnancy, he became desperate. During a private therapy session, he allegedly urged Hannah to terminate the pregnancy, warning her that having a child would destroy both their lives. However, Hannah refused, expressing her desire to keep the baby and raise it on her own. Faced with her refusal, Dixon felt trapped. Police theorized that, in a desperate attempt to preserve his reputation and avoid legal consequences, he turned to violence. On July 14, 2016, investigators believe Dr. Dixon lured Hannah to a secluded area under the pretense of helping her clear her mind. He hid his growing rage and guilt by convincing himself that this was the only way to protect his career and reputation. However, during their confrontation, his composure faltered. When Hannah stood firm in her decision, Dixon allegedly lost control, killing her in a sudden, brutal outburst. He then tried to cover up the crime by staging the scene to look like an accident. The breakthrough in the case came when police uncovered text messages between Dixon and Hannah, revealing his frantic attempts to keep their affair hidden. Surveillance footage later confirmed his presence near the crime scene that night, showing his car parked in the vicinity. When officers arrested Dr. Dixon at his home, he initially maintained a calm facade, denying any involvement. But as investigators presented the evidence, his composure cracked, and his vague, inconsistent statements betrayed his guilt. Meanwhile, his wife, Shelby Bailey Dixon, was devastated by the news. Known for staunchly defending her husband's reputation, she was left heartbroken and humiliated by his betrayal. The woman who had once stood by his side now found herself grappling with the harsh reality of his actions. With overwhelming evidence in place, Dr. Dixon was charged with Hannah's murder, leaving the community in shock and her family in grief. The investigation provided some answers about Hannah's tragic death, but left a lasting scar on everyone involved. The trial of Dr. Stanley Dixon began in May 2017, drawing intense media coverage. The courtroom was packed with family, friends, and reporters, all eager to learn the details of the shocking case. Prosecutor Victoria Lee and defense attorney Walter Davenport went head-to-head, presenting their arguments to the jury. Lee portrayed Dr. Dixon as a manipulative predator who abused his position of trust, while Davenport argued that the evidence was purely circumstantial, casting doubt on the integrity of the police investigation. As the trial progressed, the evidence against Dr. Dixon piled up, including incriminating text messages and surveillance footage. It seemed undeniable that he had both the motive and opportunity to kill Hannah. Just as the prosecution felt confident in their case, an unexpected twist shocked the courtroom. During a tense moment in the trial, Shelby Bailey Dixon, Dr. Dixon's wife, suddenly stood up and rushed to the front of the courtroom. Grabbing the microphone, she shouted, "I'm the real killer." The room fell into stunned silence. Shelby claimed she had murdered Hannah after catching her husband in a compromising position with the young woman. Her dramatic confession seemed to upend the entire trial. Despite her shocking outburst, law enforcement officials and the prosecution were skeptical. They believed Shelby was attempting to protect her husband from a long prison sentence. There was no evidence linking her to the crime, and her story contradicted the substantial evidence against Dr. Dixon. The judge quickly restored order, and Shelby was escorted out of the courtroom, leaving an eerie silence in her wake. As the trial resumed, the jury deliberated for several days before reaching a verdict. Dr. Stanley Dixon was found guilty of second-degree murder. He was sentenced to a lengthy prison term. Dixon sat quietly as the verdict was read, his expression unreadable, though those who knew him saw a flicker of disbelief in his eyes. Once a respected figure in the community, he now faced life as a convicted murderer. For Shelby, the verdict brought mixed emotions. Although her husband was held accountable, she grappled with feelings of profound loss and betrayal. Her dramatic outburst during the trial left lingering questions and a sense of unresolved pain, casting a shadow over the entire case. Hey, interested in more real-life murder mysteries? Be sure to like our content and subscribe to our channel for more true crime stories. Do you have any thoughts about this case or have a case of your own you'd like us to investigate? Leave us a comment. Until then, stay safe. In the years following Dr. Stanley Dixon's trial, the lives of those involved underwent dramatic changes. Dixon was sentenced to 25 years to life for Hannah's murder and was sent to a maximum security prison. Once a respected psychiatrist, he quickly gained a different reputation behind bars. Known for his manipulative behavior, he faced hostility from other inmates who despised him for his crimes. His downfall served as a stark reminder of how quickly one's life can unravel due to a single, devastating choice. Shelby Bailey Dixon faced a long, difficult road as she worked to rebuild her shattered life. The trial had uncovered painful secrets, leaving her to question everything she once believed about her husband. In the months following the verdict, she sought therapy to process the trauma and betrayal. During this time, Shelby became involved in community outreach programs focused on mental health awareness and support for abuse victims. By sharing her story, she hoped to raise awareness about the importance of seeking help and speaking out against abuse. Her journey of healing and empowerment became a source of inspiration as she channeled her pain into advocacy. As Shelby began to heal, she grew close to Charles Green, a longtime client of her dog grooming salon and a well-known animal advocate. Their friendship deepened over time, and by 2020, they were married in a small, intimate ceremony attended by close family and friends. In the years that followed, the couple welcomed a baby boy and adopted several new fur babies, creating a happy, blended family as they built a new life together. Ashton, also driven by the challenges he had faced in his own life, decided to become a therapist. He wanted to help others heal from their traumas, just as he had worked to heal himself. His compassionate approach quickly earned him a strong reputation, particularly for his work with troubled teens and young adults. Ashton's dedication made him a well-respected figure in the community. Over time, the paths of Stanley, Shelby, and Ashton diverged, shaped by their past decisions and experiences. Stanley remained isolated in prison, a stark reminder of the consequences of his actions. In contrast, Shelby and Ashton focused on building lives dedicated to healing and helping others. Their contrasting journeys stood as a powerful testament to how a single moment can alter the course of many lives forever.